All right, hopefully everybody can hear me. This is actually the second live stream I've done on Marsh Man Masson. I did one way back in the day, maybe, I don't know, the first month or so of the channel. So hopefully both of y'all who watched that enjoyed it. But this is the first one I've done in quite a while. Not sure how this is going to work, but we're going to talk fall fishing tonight, and hopefully we can get some comments here. I'm not seeing a comment stream. Again, this is new to me, so we'll see how it works out. But we're going to talk fall fishing, which has been absolutely fantastic lately. All right, there's your comment. All right, Jimbo Gasoline, welcome to the live stream. So the fall fishing in South Louisiana has, it has taken off incredibly in the last just really 2 or 3 weeks. It was bad. Let's face it, it was really bad through the month of September, but it got very, very good. Yeah, Justin, thanks for complimenting my glasses. You can't see the screen without them, but it got really, really good here in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Actually, Justin Bowles, who just commented, he and I made a very, very successful trip just a few weeks ago over in the Biloxi Marsh, just across Lake Bourne. We caught 50 speckled trout. And I got to tell you, it's probably the first limit I've caught, I know, in quite a while, probably since May. So very, very happy to have caught a limit that day. We put 50 in the box, actually some pretty nice fish. But, look, I predicted it throughout the summer that the fishing would get really good in the fall. And here's the reason why. Those fish were just almost entirely untouched throughout the summer. Because look, there was so much fresh water around, the fish pushed way out, and in the summertime, they need that salty water to spawn. They're going to keep moving out until they find it. And, they found it, out in, along the Chandeleur Islands, along the Barrier Islands, along the southern coast, Grand Isle, Last Island over in Cocodrie, that area. So, yeah, some were caught. Certainly it wasn't a horrible summer. Grand Isle and Cocodrie actually had a pretty good summer. East side of the river, it was just a bad summer. So those fish survived. They got, once things cooled off, they moved back into the interior marshes, and now we're catching those. And, every year, if you think about it, there's only a limited number of speckled trout that can be caught. And, if you catch them in the summer, they're not available to be caught in the fall. You do have some recruitment, some fish moving into that keeper-sized range, but by and large, there's only so many trout that can be caught in a year, and once we catch them, that's it. Then more need to be made in the spring and summer. But some hot patterns lately. Man, you really want to fish a falling tide if you can. I went yesterday. I tried to target my trip around a falling tide. Unfortunately, the wind was screaming out of the east. And I didn't get the chance to fish that falling tide because it just kept rising. It really rose right until the end of the day, and it just couldn't fish a falling tide. This time of year, it's more important than ever to fish a falling tide, and here's why. Because those shrimp are in those backwater areas when that tide falls, every single tidal cycle. Every time the tide falls, some of those shrimp get pulled out. The speckled trout know it. They set up shop often at the mouths of bayous, where that water diffuses, right? You think about a bayou, the water really rushes down that bayou, moving pretty swiftly, a little bit more difficult for a trout. Certainly they'll ambush some in those corners, but once it moves out into those big bays, lakes, whatever, that water diffuses, it slows down, and it's easy for those trout to move in and just have a feast. That's why typically this time of year, when you see shrimp popping on the surface, you see birds diving, it's almost always at the mouth of a bayou. And so you want to target your time of fishing around that. And it's so easy to do now with the buoys, right? The tide charts are almost worthless now. Definitely I look at them. I'll look at them, a couple weeks in advance. If I'm planning a trip, I want to fish a day with a good tide range. But as far as timing, you get these fronts blow through. The wind has such a profound impact, much more than the moon. So you just got to almost ignore those tide charts and look at those real-time buoys. I did a video a few months back on how to get those on your phone. And man, I rely on them all the time. I'm telling you, there's no piece of information available that I rely on more than that. those buoys are just invaluable. Anyway, that tells you when you can fish a falling tide. I thought it was going to tell me that yesterday. I saw the tide beginning to fall in the area that I was intending to fish. However, I got out there and water was rising. I'm like, what is the deal? I looked at the buoy. The water had topped out, begun to fall, but that east wind made it begin to rise again. It did a little kind of Alvin Kamara move there and faked me out, and the tide rose. Now, the good news is you can still catch fish on a rising tide. It's just a little bit different. What I did yesterday, and you'll see that video. I hope to get it out tomorrow. It may not be out until Monday. But on a rising tide, there's two different techniques that work really well. One of them is to target areas near where those fish collect on a falling tide, right? They're not going to be right at the mouth of that bayou. They might be on an adjacent flat, somewhere that they can kind of fan out and just move around looking for something to eat. When you fish that way, you really want to cover a lot of water. Throw popping corks, just kind of drift along. When you get on some fish, stick that cage and anchor, hit the spot lock on your trolling motor or lower your power poles, stay right there, fish it out. When you stop getting bites, just kind of move along until it happens again. The other way to fish is what I did yesterday, and it's really one of my favorite things to do in the fall, and it's almost always successful. You basically want to get in those kind of skinny, windy bayous and fish the bends of those bayous, right? I didn't kill the fish at any bend yesterday at all. I caught anywhere from 0 to maybe 4 fish in each bend. But when you get in those good windy bayous, you got lots of bends to try. Now, when I'm fishing that way, I typically like to pull my bait against the current. It kind of defies logic almost. It's conventional wisdom says you want to fish with the current, but I like having that bait on the bottom, just sitting there with that tail flapping. I might pick it up and put it down, just let that tail flap, and I get a ton of bites that way. And the good thing is it's really easy to connect on those fish when that happens. If you pull them with the current, a lot of times you don't feel the bites as well because obviously your bait is just being pulled along. The fish might hit it when you don't have a lot of tension on the line. You just don't feel the hit. So I really like to pull against the current. When you do that, you got to be very patient, though. You got to make sure that bait's on the bottom and really take your time. Now, that technique delivered a lot of fish for me yesterday. Obviously, you want to look for clean water. I found it yesterday in spades. Actually, I found water that may have been a little bit too clean. I threw a shrimp creole matrix shad on a death grip jig head, and man, that was just a really, really productive pattern for me yesterday. See, somebody just asked, do you ever fish sparkle beetles? I haven't in years, in all honesty. H&H makes a cockahoe, of course. H&H cockahoe, very, very popular. It's a very productive bait. I mean, it's been productive for years. I've actually looked at that bait in a pool, and it looks very, very good. I fish a lot of those, and also, of course, matrix shad. I want a bait that has a lot of tail action. That's that's just so important to me. So that bait's working when you're not actually working the bait. We all kind of hop our baits and move them along or whatever, and anything will work in that situation. But when that bait's just sitting on the bottom, as I mentioned, with that swift current pushing through, I want that tail providing a whole lot of action for me. What else did I want to talk about? Look, this is a question I get a lot. This is something else that I wanted to address. Do I do any bank fishing? I do a little bit, but not a whole lot. What time do you think would be good for trolling trout? I don't do a whole lot of trolling from trout. I just don't do it. It's definitely productive, and I know a lot of guys love it. It's certainly good in a number of areas here in South Louisiana. It used to be a lot more popular than it is today, but it's just not my thing. Just not my thing. I really enjoy when I'm fishing, feeling a fish hit. I do fish a lot of corks. I love that Versamax bolt because you can adjust the leader length on it so easily. So I do fish corks. It's a great fish finder for me. But my favorite thing to do is tight line fishing, no matter what I'm targeting. If I'm targeting bass, I love Texas rigs. Look, I throw a lot of other baits as well, but I just love that tap. I mean, to me, that's what keeps me up at night. That's what gets me up in the morning, getting out there and feeling that tap, setting the hook, and having that instant serotonin release or whatever it is in your brain, knowing that, hey, that's a fish, setting the hook and reeling him in. That to me is more exciting than anything. And that's why I drive a lot of my friends crazy because I'm not so interested in sitting on action. Like, look, if the fish are biting, I'm gonna stay there and keep fishing them. But I'm not gonna go back to an area where I had success previously. I like finding fish. I just that to me is more fun than actually catching fish. Trying to figure them out and seeing what they'll bite and why, trying to figure out why they're there. That to me is that's just a fun part of fishing. And people ask me all the time, why don't you post spots or post areas that you're fishing? Because it's just not valuable. It just isn't. People think it is, but it really just isn't. Everybody thinks that they're the only one watching and that they'll have it all to themselves, and that's just not the case. If I put a pin of where I caught fish, the next day it'd be a whole lot of boats there. Nobody would catch anything, and everybody would be looking at each other about what to do next. I'd rather teach you how to fish so you can do it in your area. To me, that's a whole lot more valuable. You should do a video with Chaz. Trout wouldn't stand a chance. Well, I'll tell you this. Chaz is an excellent Lake Pontchartrain fisherman. My buddy Justin Bowles, who I fished with last week, he and I always laugh. Chaz is a very private fisherman. He fishes a lot on his own. Fishes with a kind of a close knit group of guys. And I feel very close to Chaz. He's an excellent fisherman. I talk to him daily. But he and I have never once fished together, and I know my buddy Justin's the same way. He's never fished with him either. But yeah, that guy's a tremendous fisherman. He's a young man. He's not an old man, but he's already a legend in that Lake Pontchartrain area. Which, yeah, I saw somebody else commented earlier that the whole Regalese Lake Pontchartrain area has really taken off, and it definitely has. Yeah, the fishing's gotten very good over there. And but really, that's true everywhere. This is the time of year that the fish leave those kind of saltier water. That's something else I wanted to talk about. There's a big misconception in Louisiana that salty water is best. That salty water produces the most fish. And I got to tell you this: I target areas on purpose that are not salty. The fishing is just far better in areas that have freshwater influence. That's the only areas I fish, period. I made a trip a couple weeks ago down to Grand Isle. Obviously, that was an exception, so I guess I shouldn't say period. But I do fish some salty water, but very limited. I like getting in areas that have freshwater influence. The bass are obviously very thick there. The redfish are thicker nowhere other than areas that have a lot of freshwater because they have an abundance of food to eat. Speckled trout fishing in water with freshwater influence is absolutely horrendous throughout the summer. You take the months of June, July, August, and September and forget about it. You're not going to catch any keeper trout there. But I'm willing to accept that. I'll bide my time. I'll go down to Grand Isle. I'll go down to Cogadry. I'll run out to the Barrier Islands and fish trout when I want to in the summer. But by and large, I'm going to stick in the marsh and fish bass and redfish. And wait for those trout to come in, which they are certainly in now, and the fishing's very good. I'm seeing some conversation about limits. Obviously, very different here. People ask a lot of questions when they see us keeping fish. To me, a 12-inch speckled trout is more desirable to keep than an 18-inch speckled trout. In fact, I don't keep 18-inch speckled trout. I don't keep anything over about maybe 16 inches because they're just not good. I just don't enjoy eating them, and I'm not going to keep a fish that I don't think is prime quality. 12-inch speckled trout, delicious, very good. And if you want to do a test, when you get home, fry up all your trout, leave them whole, and put your 12-inch trout next to your 18-inch trout when it's cooked, your fillets, and see what all your guests go to. Everybody's going to pick that 12-inch trout. So I like to keep small trout. I don't like to keep big trout. But I'll tell you this, the limits in South Louisiana are definitely going to change. They're not going to stay that way much longer at all. In fact, it'll be very soon. We'll be looking at a size increase, I think. Don't know. I don't have any inside information at all, but I would suspect we'll probably end up with 13-inch minimum and 15 speckled trout per day. Although that really won't do anything to help trout stocks or anything along those lines. And we could get into all that, but the biology of speckled trout is really, really interesting to me. It's something I've studied for years. And speckled trout, you almost kind of have to look at as an annual crop. Not quite. That's not quite entirely true, but it is close to true. Those fish grow very, very quickly. They get recruited into the fishery within a year, and so look, there's never going to be any harm done to the fishery by overfishing. It's just not possible. Not any long-term damage. I've seen people comment and say, look, I want to make sure there are trout around for my kids and grandkids. It doesn't work that way. You could say that about red snapper or something along those lines, but a long-lived species like that. But speckled trout are not that way. So you could have just a very, very few speckled trout off the coast of Louisiana, and they would entirely repopulate the coast by the next year. And as evidence of that, you just look at the 1989 freeze and what happened in 1990 and 1991. When we had more speckled trout than we've ever had, ever. Statistically, we had more speckled trout in 1991 than we've ever had. So, the fish are going to be fine, and we'll see. To increase the biomass, you have to have an SPR of at least 20%. What are you basing that on? I mean, do you have scientific evidence to back that up? The SPR conservation standard in Louisiana has never been 20%, but we do have a significant harvest here. Obviously, some years better than others, but and SPR, by the way, for people who don't know, that spawning potential ratio, that is the number of fish that exist in a fishery compared to what would exist in an unfished fishery, right? So if you didn't target speckled trout at all, if they were off limits, nobody could fish them at all, that would be an unfished fishery. This year already for trout has been great. Yeah, definitely. I'm very, very optimistic for this fall and winter, and I'm expecting really good hauls. And I think a lot of the people who we're getting very concerned, and I don't fault anybody at all for being concerned about our fisheries. I would only fault you if you were a fish hog and didn't care at all. But I think a lot of people who've been concerned are going to have their fears, set aside and put to rest because it's going to be good. It's already good, and it's unfortunate. I was doing Kevin Ford's show earlier tonight. It's really unfortunate that the weather the past couple of weekends hasn't been all that great. And it's not gonna be great again this weekend. It looks like tomorrow's gonna be a complete washout. Saturday, at least half the day is gonna be a washout. So, so it's unfortunate it's happening on the weekend when most people can fish. But if you can get out, if you can avoid the weather, get out there this weekend. Maybe Saturday afternoon and certainly on Sunday looks pretty good. I saw somebody ask if I plan on fishing Calcasieu Lake anytime soon. And actually, I just mentioned Kevin Ford. He and I have talked about making a trip over there and fishing with Captain Jeff Poe. Very, very good angler over there. I think at some point I certainly will be going over there. The biggest speckled trout I caught in my fishing career, I caught on Calcasieu Lake. It was an 8-pound, 8-ounce fish back in June of 2001. And, to show you how fisheries run in cycles, that fish back then was, hey, congratulations, nice fish, handshake type fish. Whereas now an 8-pound, 8-ounce fish would definitely make news. It'd be shared all over the place on social media. But it's just not a good big fish trout run that we're in. And look, I'm a big freshwater proponent, as I just mentioned earlier. But the reason that the big fish have not been as prevalent lately is because of the freshwater. It just pushes them way out. They're not as convenient, not as easy for anglers to catch. If you remember back in the 90s, those of you who are as old as me, old as dirt, remember back in the 90s and early 2000s, we had a drought. I mean, the whole Southeast had a drought. Lakes were drying up. Impoundments where people got water were completely drying up. It was really, really bad. But we had tons of salt water around down here, and there were just big fish everywhere. And Chad Champagne, again, who I talked about earlier, he and I have talked about it. He kind of cut his fishing teeth during that time, which was an exceptionally good time. It wasn't normal. It wasn't normal at all. But to him coming up now, he thinks that was kind of normal when it just wasn't. And what we have now is not normal either. I'll tell you that. We've had some very, very uh, uh, wet years. I mean, just record wet years. You look at the Mississippi River, record year in 2011, record year again this year, and high rivers ever since then. And that just makes those fish tougher to catch during the time when a lot of people target them, and pushes, big speckled trout can't handle freshwater as well as small speckled trout. That's just a basic biological fact. And so they push farther out. So, the pendulum will swing again. Sooner or later, we'll have a lot of, saltwater around again, and people will be catching big trout a whole lot closer to the coast. But we're just not in that. We're just not in a cycle now. So you just got to kind of bide your time and enjoy catching the fish that are good eaters. Keep what you need and release what you don't need, and just have a good time getting those bites. Let's see, back into so basic presence of bait. So basics, yeah, moving water, presence of bait, yeah. I mean, the big three things always: clean water, moving water, and bait. That's three things I always look for. And as you fish more and more, you kind of learn how to read the water, and you learn areas that are likely to hold fish, and 9 out of the 10 of them won't hold fish. But if you just cover water, you keep hitting those, you keep hitting them. Sooner or later, you're going to find one that does hold fish. And again, that to me is the fun. That's what I like to do. And it's not going to a buddy's spot that he put an X on the map and throwing out the anchor and catching 25 speckled trout and heading home. That to me is just, I've got no interest in doing that. I'd literally rather stay home. So the fun for me is just getting out and targeting fish and trying to figure them out, and just fishing and getting unexpected bites. And that's just what I enjoy. So, all right, well, look, I'm gonna wrap this up. It looks like we're 22 minutes in. I'm sorry I couldn't get to your questions. It's really difficult on this phone. I just discovered that YouTube doesn't allow you to do a live stream from a Mac, which I'm incredulous about. I couldn't believe it. So I have to do it from my phone, and the comments just blaze through really, really quickly. So I apologize I didn't get to them. Hopefully I can answer them in the comments section. But I really enjoyed doing this. I hope we get a chance to do it some more in the future. And man, take care, everybody. Look, love getting comments from you anytime, please. And go check out the Patreon page, patreon.com/Marsh Man Masson. That will provide you some more access. And I'm happy to answer questions, but I just can't answer everybody's, but I can answer everybody's there. So go check that out if you can. All right, peace out. Take care. Hope to see you in the water.